Hello everybody, my name is Brady and I'm a 19th century American historian and we're back with another React video, and today we're going to be checking out more Hamilton. But before we do, I want to give a shout out to the newest channel member. Thank you to Isaac Fletcher. Thank you, Isaac, for becoming a channel member and supporting the channel and all that good stuff. And if any of you want to become a channel member, there is a link to do so in the description box below, so do that and buy a sticker. Bird Mom designed some cute as heck stickers of this guy, so you can get those. It helps. All right, now let's get into the main video. So today we're going to be talking about Washington on your side, and we've talked about this concept a little bit already. When Hamilton's career is at its zenith, you can tie that directly back to Washington. When you talk about his biggest appointments, they all go back to Washington. Aide-de-camp, Major General under the Adams administration, George Washington was huge in lobbying for Hamilton to get that position. Washington's like, I want to choose my generals, and one of them is going to be Hamilton, whether you like it or not, Mr. Adams. And that's how that all worked out. And then there's the Secretary of Treasury position. That's also Washington. So you can imagine, without George Washington, Hamilton's career would have been completely different. I'm not saying he couldn't have accomplished great things, but never on this magnitude. Without Washington, Hamilton would not be who he ended up becoming. So I'm excited to talk about this song. Let's get this started. I love this sound. It's a nice synth.
It must be nice to have Washington on your side. It must be nice to have Washington on your side. Every action has an equal opposite reaction.
First of all, I like that Burr and Jefferson are kind of at the forefront right now, because both of them kind of rubbed Washington the wrong way. Well, at a time, Washington really respected Thomas Jefferson. Some stuff is going to come out after this more, where Jefferson talks a little bit of crap behind the scenes about George Washington, and George Washington, I don't know if he's ever really going to forgive him. It's hard to know what was actually going through his brain, but when George Washington felt like he was slighted by somebody, he could hold a grudge. While he could also be magnanimous, he could also hold a grudge. So he ends up getting in a little bit of beef with Jefferson, and apparently Burr rubbed him the wrong way early on as well. So this is kind of a perfect song for these two to do together.
Thanks to Hamilton, our cabinet's fractured as its equal opposite reaction. Thanks to Hamilton, our cabinet's fractured into factions. Try not to crack under the stress, we're breaking down like fractions. We smack each other in the press and we don't print retractions.
I like the way he talks in this one, and it really feels like top-notch, pretentious Thomas Jefferson right here. Jefferson was kind of a science geek. He liked that sort of stuff. He was an ideal gentleman when you look at it. A gentleman during the time, a lot of the time, was somebody who did not have to work to make money, so they could spend time doing other things, like noble things like advancing science and stuff. So the fact that he references equal opposite reaction, that's Newton, he would have been quite familiar with that. He talks about fractions. It's kind of surface level stuff, but it does say something about him, so I kind of like that touch. And then to smack each other in the press and we don't print retractions. Jefferson was great at newspaper warfare. He had his own newspaper people who would call out the things he doesn't like in the press. So he knew how to handle that. And Hamilton could do it too. The New York Post, which is referenced in this musical, he tried to use that a little bit to combat the Jefferson administration when he goes into power. So there's a lot of newspaper warfare going on. It's some of the cooler stuff to follow during the times, though sometimes the writing can be a little dry. If you read into it and really get what they're saying, sometimes it can get nasty.
I get no satisfaction witnessing his fits of passion. The way he primps and preens and dresses like the pits of fashion. Our poorest citizens, our farmers, live ration to ration as Wall Street robs them blind in search of chips to cash in.
Oh, that is a really good one here. And this is one of those cases where Jefferson's kind of right here. I know a lot of the people who listen to Hamilton tend to like Hamilton and tend to dislike Jefferson. This is one of those cases where I totally follow what he's going with. So after the war, a lot of soldiers are given these bonds that are supposed to tie them over as like a form of payment, but they were basically worth nothing at the time. So what happens? All these rich people start coming in, they start buying up these bonds, and then after Hamilton comes in and like gets his financial system rolling, all these rich people are able to cash in on these bonds whose value has just skyrocketed. So the people who actually worked for that stuff are struggling under Hamilton's system. And they had a lot of suggestions like, maybe we should honor the bonds from the original people, or should we honor the bonds from the people who bought them? Because that's I guess in a sense, the free market or whatever. And it didn't end up helping the farmers and a lot of these poorer types who ended up fighting the war. Another thing he said, hold on.
I get no satisfaction witnessing his fits of passion, the way he primps and preens and dresses like the pits of fashion.
That is, yeah, this was commented on in a previous song. I think it was the Cabinet Battle, and he talked about how Hamilton was like new money and Jefferson's like old money. Jefferson, he never really had to work for what he had. He inherited so many slaves. The way he dressed was not as much like he was like this high class guy. He dressed like all right, but he didn't dress super flashy. But he did live a high-class life. If you look at his house, Monticello, if you've not seen pictures of it, it's on the back of the nickel, but I don't think the nickel does it justice. Look up Monticello. I'd say it's the nicest historical house in America. There are bigger ones. There are big, fancy, whatever. I think design-wise, it is the nicest house this country had, like, historically. So I think it's really cool. I've never gotten to go there, but I would really like to. So when he's trying to be this guy who's like representing the poor Southern farmers, he can do that. You can absolutely do that even if you're rich, but he can only do it in like an abstract sense. He can't really relate to those people, but it doesn't mean what he's saying isn't legitimate.
Our poorest citizens, our farmers, live ration to ration.
Oh yeah, the poorest citizens thing, I'm sorry, I'm pausing a lot in this one, because there is a lot to go into. Some farmers are going to be really poor, some farmers are all right. At least a lot of farmers, one thing that they do have that a lot of people on the lower rung don't have is land in a lot of cases. Some of them work on land that's not their own or whatever, but they would at least have land. So, but Jefferson wouldn't be looking at like the poor merchants in the North. He didn't really respect them nearly as much. That's why he kind of focuses in on farmers. He wanted an agrarian society. He didn't really want as much of a commercial society, even though the two played off of one another. The Northerners benefited off of selling the goods made in the South, and the Southerners benefited because the Northerners were able to buy their goods.
As Wall Street robs him blind in search of chips to cash in, this prick is asking for someone to bring him to task.
Getting mad.
Somebody give me some dirt on his vacuous mask so we can at last unmask him. I'll pull the trigger on him. Someone load the gun and cock it. While we were all watching, he got Washington in his pocket. It must be nice. It must be nice to have Washington on your...
The fact that Madison is in this song is a little weird, because out of anybody on the Democratic Republican side, Madison was probably the most, I guess, in Washington's ear. They definitely had a lot of respect between the two of them. Once the partisan divides go up, obviously, it's not as easy, but Madison, like Hamilton, both of them were kind of in Washington's ear during really important times, like the creation of the Constitution and all that.
Our side, it must be nice, it must be nice to have Washington on your side. Look back at the Bill of Rights, which I wrote. The ink hasn't dried.
So yes, he did write the Bill of Rights. That's like the big thing that Madison gets credit for. The fun thing that doesn't always get mentioned is the fact that he wasn't really in favor of the Bill of Rights early on, when he would have been considered a Federalist like Hamilton. They didn't want to create a Bill of Rights, which is just like freedom of speech, right to bear arms, like all that stuff. The military can't live in your house, those sorts of things. Yeah, when they start writing all that stuff, it was like feared that if you accidentally left something out, it would be implied that you don't have that right, so it would be better just not to write what rights you have. But good thing for Madison that he hopped on the Bill of Rights bandwagon there, because that is his legacy.
It must be nice, it must be nice to have Washington on your side. So he's doubled the size of the government. Wasn't the trouble with much of our previous government size? Look in his eyes. See how he...
It's so weird, because Madison, he is definitely a placeholder for a lot of other Democratic Republicans who weren't actually fit in here. But when he talks about like the growing of government and how Hamilton had a lot to do with that, Madison also had a lot to do with that. He just wanted it to grow to a point. He didn't want to go nearly as far as Hamilton did. But it is a little weird because he had so much to do with that. But also, I kind of have to recognize that his character is not just James Madison. He represents like a certain idea of the Democratic Republican Party alongside Jefferson. So he's more than just that. And that's what happens when you have an on-stage production. You can't fit in all the characters. That's one of those places in which I am most forgiving when it comes to like historical inaccuracies and stuff, because I get the limitations of a stage production.
Follow the center of his enterprise. Centralizing national credit and making American credit competitive. If we don't stop it, we aid and abet it. I have to resign. Somebody has to stand up for the South. Somebody has to stand up to his mouth. If there's a fire you're trying to douse, you can't put it out from inside the house. I'm in the...
So this is when Jefferson starts thinking like, okay, I'm going to resign. And I think the big reason above all why he would resign, you could talk about like, you can't put it out from inside the house. I think at this point he is just fatigued because he is just not getting his way. He's fighting his ass off, trying to get his idea for America through. But I think he's recognized that Washington is, despite the fact that he's not formally a Federalist, Washington's a Federalist. He's a Hamilton guy. He likes Hamilton. He likes what he's doing. And despite the fact that he's from Virginia, he's not a Democratic Republican, and he can't win him back at this point. It's too late. So there we go.
Stop it, we aid and abet it. I have to resign.
So yeah, he decides like, I'm gonna resign because like I just can't do anything here. I am powerless if I can't persuade Washington.
Somebody has to stand up for the South. Somebody has to stand up to his mouth. If there's a fire you're trying to douse, you can't put it out from inside the house. I'm in the cabinet. I am complicit in watching him grabbing and power and kissing. If Washington isn't gonna listen to disciplined dissidents, this is the difference. This kid is out. Oh, this immigrant isn't somebody we chose.
And I've talked about the immigrant thing, and like, yes, Hamilton is kind of an immigrant he's an immigrant in like the weirdest way. The way he's classified here, obviously it's a product of modern politics, the way they frame this here, because immigration was a huge issue and still is when Hamilton was in production. Hamilton is an immigrant in like the weirdest sense because like where he came from was still part of the British Empire. So he would have been just as British as any of them. And then when they broke off, he was in America for like almost the whole struggle, pretty much the whole struggle. Like as far as that, I guess there's some struggle that predates him that isn't formally considered the revolution or whatever, but it is. So I've started to get a little iffy about the immigrant title for him because he wouldn't have really been considered an immigrant. Only people like John Adams who like just hate him because they hate him because they hate him because he's a pain in the ass, just looking for something to to make fun of him for. I don't know. I think it really comes with, because this rumor that was started about Hamilton maybe being part black, which it doesn't seem like there's anything good behind that to reinforce that. But I assume that's like the big thing why people would use immigration against him. Just to be like, ooh, he might be a little bit black. Ooh. It's stupid.
Democratic Republicans. Now follow the money and see where it goes. Because every second the treasury grows. If we follow the money and see where it leads, get in the weeds, look for the seeds of Hamilton's misdeeds. It must be nice. It must be nice. Follow the money and see where it goes. It must be nice. It must be nice. The emperor has no clothes. We won't be invisible. We won't be denied. Still, it must be nice. It must be nice to have Washington on your side.
So I love the Democratic Republican stuff. Like anything with Jefferson, anything with Burr, they're just fantastic. They're some of my favorite things, and I've already talked about how like the Burr songs are some of my favorite, but I think this one is especially good. Like, of course, like most songs have little historical moments, but that's not how I choose to look at most of it. There's some like egregious things. Like I really don't like the playing up of Hamilton as an abolitionist and making him more of a hero than he has to be. Because honestly, I think that waters down the complexity of his story, and I think that's the most appealing part of it. I think making him a complex character is where his best moments go. When they just try to make him a hero, not as huge into that. I really like this concept for a song, because it really makes you. Because this is where everything's going to start going downhill. We're going to be getting into the Adams administration soon. Hamilton will have some moments here because, of course, he's going to be a major general. So how does that fall apart? I guess we'll get into that. And we have the follow the money stuff. I guess a better time for that conversation would be one of the later songs where we really get into his financial dealings, which I've talked about a little bit, but we can get more into a little bit later on. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had fun breaking this one down. I love there's the sing-songy ones. I really like the rapping ones that really lean into the rapping because there's so much to do. There's so much you can get out of so little time. All right. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.